Hi everyone, this is Abel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm bringing you a bunch of reviews, a couple of reading updates. This is going to be great. Let's get ready. But before we start, remember that if you're into science fiction and fantasy books, this is the perfect place for you. So if you want to see more videos like this, please consider subscribing, leave a like, share this video. Also, you can support the channel by checking out my own epic fantasy novel, The Crimson Fire. The link is in the description down below. Let's start with An Exile of Water and Gold by Joshua Walker. This is an high fantasy story, a political investigation, kind of a murder mystery, and then there's war and deception and stabbing and a lot of stuff. There's a lot of going on in this book that has the not easy task to introduce us to an entire world, aside the fact that it has to do all the heavy lifting that we usually get in a first installment in a series. This is the curse and the bless of every kind of first book in a series, because they have to introduce the characters, they have to introduce the conflict, they have to introduce the world. And I have to say that Joshua Walker did a very respectable job here to bringing us all of this information in a digestible way. You never feel overwhelmed. You never feel like you have been assaulted by the amount of information that you're getting, and it's always everything pretty clear. So that's an absolutely a big accomplishment, because it's not easy. It's not easy, and many first installation in many series, they live or die, depending of how much to make us feel that the story is worth our attention, and that we are embarking in a series that will potentially keep us in our interest alive and well for multiple books. So the basic gist of this story is that we have the civilization that lives on a tree, an immense tree that covers a big amount of land, and that has particular abilities, and the people living in this tree and around this tree, they get specific abilities. At least most of the people of this civilization, they're not quite like every other humans. They're taller, they have gray shiny hair, silver hair, and they live much longer. They can look a little bit like elves, but they're not elves, okay? They're an original race, and that's one of the very cool things that this novel does. It's just pretty original. I don't think I have ever seen anything like this executed this way in a high fantasy novel, and that's pretty unique. That is high praise, given the amount of novels that I read, especially for epic fantasy and space opera. So when I find something that it's completely new for me, and I say, wow, 99% of what I'm reading I have never found in anything else, that's a plus, okay? And so you have this kind of people, and they have this race, this civilization living around this huge tree, and they have complicated relationship with the other nations. The Exile you have on the cover, and I don't think I'm spoiling anything because you have the gist of this on the description, the back of the book, is one of the protagonists of the series. It's a multi-POV story that has an accident and gets it becomes an exile. I think that this nation and this tree is kind of positioned on a plateau, so they're on a higher level, compared to the rest of the other lands. So there is a problem with a river and that flows near the tree, that gets purified because of the tree, that has this ability to clean the water. Because on the backstory of this novel, there was some kind of plague that was influencing the river. So during an accident, the river changes. It becomes almost alive. It boils and it becomes contaminating the land, and he gets trapped in this incredible natural event, in this disaster, and he gets flushed out over the border of this river and the plateau, and he falls out, okay, in another land, which is adjacent to the land that we have when the peoples of the tree leaves. And he has to survive, so he has to decide how to come back in his place. He's called an exile, he becomes an exile, because the moment you step out of the borders of your nation, you cannot come back, okay? So you cannot come back, you're cursed, you're not part of that civilization anymore. And in the novel, it takes a little bit of time to understand why, and he himself, the protagonist, doesn't understand what's going on. Why am I not part of this? He kind of accepts it, he kind of challenges it. It takes it a little bit of time for him to decide what is going on, and if he wants to challenge this rule, which is commonly accepted between the people of his population, of his country. So there's an interesting internal conflict there. And then we have other POVs. We have his fiancée, a girl who he is a seamstress and designs beautiful clothes, which is on. She has to an interesting arc. She's on the verge of getting a huge contract designing clothes for the elite of the civilization, which are also the rulers and are the guardians, because they have telepathic abilities and they have other supernatural abilities. And then we have one of those elites, which is one character that we had met in a novella that preceded the story, which is The Rest of the Gods, that I loved so much, which is probably the most interesting characters of the whole novel. And she's in a peculiar position. She's a woman that is kind of struggling with her position as the guardian of the place, because she has a very liberal and proactive attitude. She wants to protect the people, she wants to do what she has to do, but she also needs that this civilization needs to change a little bit to make the life of the whole country better, but she has to constantly struggle with the establishment that is far more traditional, and it keeps all the cards of the truce very close to their chest. So we have many characters and other ones that you meet during the story, especially one that you hit far more when the story is very well on its way. And we have a cast of characters that are all very interesting, and the conflict is interesting. And the more you read about them, you see that there's something bigger going on. Because just at the introduction of the story, as I told you, there is this strange things going on with the water, and there is this also this feeling that the civilization is hiding something, that the status quo of the people living on this tree is the result of a sequence of patterns repeating themselves, of cover-ups and truths that have been hidden, and that cannot last, of course. The novel has really good pacing. The chapters are short, but not bite-sized, okay? They're kind of in a sweet spot where it becomes kind of a page-turner, because you say, okay, another chapter, but they never feel undercooked, okay? They're kind of in a nice spot when it makes the novel really digestible, but you never feel like, come on, why are you cutting this chapter right here? Because most of the time, when you cut a chapter and you will switch to another characters, if that kind of shift is not properly handled, would make for a jarring experience. It doesn't happen here. The characters are good, they're relatable. It takes a little bit of time to actually feel them as people, because, and now I think this is a good segue to talk about the things that I think don't work at 100%, because when the novel fires on all cylinders, it goes and it doesn't stop. But I think that it takes a little bit of time to get there because of the setup. I think the biggest weakness of this novel is the setup. Things happen really fast. The main conflict, it starts at page 25, so it is really I don't think that that's the exact page, but it's just to tell you that things happen really fast. So we have the introduction of the protagonist, we have the introduction of his fiance, we have the introduction of this high-ranking woman that I told you, the one that was already introduced on the novella, and we have a prologue with another characters that will come back during the novel. And Walker does a good job at giving us the basic gist of what their lifestyle is and what they want and what they cannot achieve because of the accident that kickstarts the story, and then the story goes. But I think that we needed a little bit more time and a little more nuance for them before things started to escalate. Because that incident that kickstarts the story is so huge and so strong, and it's supposed to be so tragic, but we know so little about those characters that at least I was a little bit asking myself, do I really care what's happening? I mean, sure, of course, if you see a tragedy, even if you don't know the people, the person going through that bad time, you can empathize with them. But this is a novel. This is a completely different medium. It's not like watching the news. We need elements to spark a deeper kind of interest that will hopefully keep that interest for hundreds of pages. So I think that maybe in the introduction of the protagonist and of his fiancée, the main conflict that they had as people before that accident was just meh. And the fiancée, she has a much more strong personality than him, and she has she has plans for the future, she has a very defined arc that goes through another arc, and there are mysteries about her that makes her pretty compelling. The protagonist is pretty plain, and that is a feature of the novel. It happens quite often that in epic fantasy novel, the protagonist, especially old style novels, the protagonist is pretty bland, especially at the beginning, because he is a vessel for us as readers to enjoy the story. And the more you characterize him, the more walls you put up that could make you as a reader feel less of a protagonist of the story. So I understand why Drift, the protagonist, feels that way in the beginning, because the more you go through the story, the more you see that he has other things to say, and there's a complicated backstory there too. But I still think that we needed something more. I don't know, maybe charisma, maybe some kind of quirk, something to make it stand out a little bit. And also, this kind of reflects on the way the plot moves in the story. Because a few things, especially the beginning, before everything kind of converge in the second and third act, it kind of happens. Especially after poor guy, is flushed out from his kingdom and he has to survive and he has to meet other people. I think that in the first act, too many things happen in a very convenient way. So yeah, we are meeting these people. I just survived from that catastrophe. Oh wow, I'm meeting very hospitable people. They're helping me. They ask for anything. I don't have to worry about anything to survive. And I think it's a missed opportunity, because it would have been a very nice way to explore the way that country and the people from that tree state dealt with the other people around. But there are no conflict there. He doesn't have to do nothing to prove himself and to prove himself as a character that is worth the label of a protagonist, okay? And I think that the reason for why this happens this way most of the succession of events in the first act happened this way is because the author was trying to giving us the most digestible way possible to understand the world and the relationship between countries and the main conflict, and leaving the more complicated stuff for the second and third act. And I understand that and I respect that, but the result is that the first act is really, really dull. Okay, because we have characters that don't stand up, we have a succession of things that happen and kind of happen, we have details slipping and going on, and then having maybe an answer after many pages. For example, I told you that this incident is about the river, that it's boiling and it's contaminating the stuff, and I kept asking myself, after the guy is washed out, was that antidote contained? Did the river stop boiling and contaminating the land? And I got an answer 100 pages after. And I kept asking myself, are the people of this place going on with their lives without noticing, or was it contained? And I didn't get an answer after. I had to wait, but that question was chewing at my brain. So the novel has this attitude when kinds of takes the succession of events and the plot from a distance, when it is supposed to really try and take you in, especially the beginning. As I told you, the rest of the novel is better and it flows much coherently. The pacing, it increases, the drama increases, and it becomes big. There's a good emotional ending that it's not exactly an ending because it's opening the doors for the rest of the series. But the setup, it's weak, and I think it's a shame because that's the part when readers decide if they want to continue the stories or not. All in all, I think this is a very good novel, very original, with good characters and a very interesting world. A good plot that takes a little bit to start firing on all cylinders to properly work, but then when it works, it works. And I think you should give it a try. Joshua Walker is a really promising voice. I think that in a way this novel it benefits on reading The Rest of the Gods. I know that he and the other novella that I don't remember right now, that he designed the novel and the novellas to be all of them entry points to this series, so that you can decide if you want to read the novella first or if you want to go and read the novel right away. But I think that you'll enjoy the story better if you read The Rest of the Gods first, because it does a very good introduction of one of the characters, that it is one of the main POVs here, which is not repeated in the novel because you don't need it, of course, but you miss something so much there. And as I told you, that's the best character for me, the more interesting character. So if you lose that, of course you can go back and read it after you finish the main novel, but I think you'll enjoy the experience more if you read The Rest of the Gods first. Okay, it does a huge amount of work, a huge amount of heavy lifting to ease you inside this story. Okay, so give it a try. If you have read this story, let me know what you think about it. And yeah, I can't wait to read the rest of the series. I don't know if it is just a trilogy or more, but I know that Joshua Walker is hard at work on book 2 and on other novellas too. Subscribe to his newsletter. He has always a ton of things to disclose about this series. It's really interesting. You should absolutely give it a try. Then a lit RPG by the Longwinded one called The Children of the Cold Moon. This was not on my radar by any means. I was contacted by the author and I was really glad that they did, because I always say I want to read more lit RPG, but it is always so difficult for me to try and decide what title to begin with, because I know the heavy hitters, I know the big names, okay? But the more a series becomes popular, the less it is attractive for me in many ways, because I want to be part of the hype. I want to love a series, but many times, what makes a series especially fascinating for many readers makes it fall flat for me. So it's a good thing that I am trying to make my way through this really big subgenre with a lesser known series. And this is not a jab to the authors. I wish them to become really famous and really soon, okay? But it's a good thing because I don't have any kind of expectation. I take the novel as it is. This is a good thing, but it is also a bad thing because I always think that there is an added value on reviewing a novel when you're really familiar with the subgenre, and it makes this review a little bit biased, of course, because I know so little about lit RPG, but the basic gist is that this is a portal fantasy. Many call it isekai, I think, in this subgenre. So we have a protagonist that sits from our world and gets whisked away in another world, in a fantastic world. As far as I can tell, this is kind of heavy on the lit RPG mechanics because you have stats in the novel that are written in a different way. They have a different typography inside the text. The author was so generous to give me a hard copy of the novel so I can see the way the text is organized there. I'll be curious to see how that works on an audiobook. But we have the protagonist that really fast in the span of the first chapter, a couple of chapters, gets uprooted, okay, from his natural life and gets and goes into this novel, into this new world. He has a really interesting relationship with a guardian of sorts. So he's a man that has been in charge of taking care of him for his whole life in this world, on Earth, and then it becomes a central figure in the rest of the novel inside this other world. And this evolution, him changing as a protagonist, as a regular guy, from a regular guy to someone who will become kind of a hero, is also really fast too. So the novel has this really nice curve when you learn things with him. Okay, you're introduced to the mechanics, you're introduced to the aesthetics and the lore of the world, which is pretty unique for me too, because I haven't read many novels with that kind of folklore in any kind of genre. But that's a me thing. It's not because that folklore wasn't used in any way in other novels. It is, okay, but I am not that much familiar with that. So that's a plus, because it was interesting to see how the creatures and the supernatural stuff of that world were used in this novel. Okay, so perfect. And then I think that's the base of the mechanics of, in a lit RPG, the protagonist has to change, has to learn, has to face a bunch of challenges to try and understand what's his place in this world, and that's something that I really appreciated. And because I think that for the general audience, the mechanics of the video games and role-playing games transcripted into novels, they're not enough to keep you interested the more you grow up. I think that this is a genre that it is incredibly fascinating for younger people, but the older you get, the more you want on a character development side. I think there was a nice effort here to make the protagonist have a nice arc and a good characterization, because he's not exactly young when the novel begins. It's not exactly a coming of age story. He's, you could say that in a bunch of aspects of his life, he is an accomplished person, but he has something unresolved on an internal struggle. And I like that the novel focused more on him acquiring a newfound knowledge of the kind of person that he can be through the adventure that he has during the novel. That's respectable, that's interesting, because for what I can understand from lit RPGs, to keep the attention of the readers for many, many years and many, many novels, because usually they get authors in this subgenre. They're really prolific and they pump out books after books. To get there, if you're really young, that's the perfect kind of novel that you want to read. The older you get, the more you need. But this is kind of when I need to stop, because as I told you, I don't have that much of an experience with the subgenre. So all of my consideration and my musing, they could fall flat. I can only tell you that for me, being fresh in this genre, this worked. I would have loved here too a little bit more of a setup at the beginning, because I told you it happens so fast. He's eradicated by his world and so fast jumps in another one. I think that for me as a person and as a reader, I love when the characters get a little bit more time to breathe. But again, I don't know if this genre demands for this kind of structure so soon and so fast. But that's not to say that the novel isn't deep and it doesn't have any kind of good character development, because it does. Okay, it's a structural thing and it's a personal thing. Maybe for lovers of lit RPG, this is exactly what they want. Okay, it's an effective novel, has a nice aesthetic, a good lore, good characters. You should absolutely check it out. And if you have read it, let me know what you think about it. And lastly, something really unique for me, something unusual, which is a collection of short stories by various authors, but they've been heralded and guided by Blake Armstrong, one who contacted me to offer me a copy of this collection of short stories. For me, this was a strange and compelling and unique experience, because it was like reading Black Mirror. Okay, so all the stories are set in the near future. They have all really strong ideas and they move really fast. What I really think it makes this story so interesting is the fact that they could actually happen. The science, the concept behind any of those stories are really explained in an interesting way. The language is pretty well researched. The way characters move and the way authors are able to deliver such strong concepts in a short amount of time is remarkable. I don't think I will ever be able to do something like that. Writing short stories is difficult. It is really difficult. And I think the collection has a nice balance between the verticalities of the stories and the underlined horizontal through line of themes, because most of the time we deal with the evolution of technology, the way they change our life in an evident way or in a more subtle way. Especially at the beginning, I think the first bunch of the set of short stories are the one that are the stronger for me. They stayed with me for a longer time, and then at the end too. And I think the most effective result of this short story collection is the fact that they spark a bunch of questions. How do we deal with a world that is controlled by technology? How do we deal with a world that is asking more and more every day to surrender her privacy? And what happens in a world when the people that surround you have given up that kind of freedom, that huge amount of information, the huge amount of agency to technology without realizing it properly? How do we face that? Because we should ask those questions today to ourselves, to our families, to our friends. This is happening. Our life is changing so fast because of the way we use technology, because of the way we use surveillance, because of the way we interact and interface with technology, because of the way artificial intelligence is developing and spreading in our life. It makes for a bunch of really poignant and really interesting questions. So this is not the kind of stories that I can delve deep into details, because if I give you the gist of the story, I tell you the whole story, because they're short story, really, really short. So the only thing that I can do is to try and encourage you to give it a try, especially because this is a format that it's not familiar for me. I read mostly novels and sometimes novellas, but this is the kind of story that gives you the dopamine hit really fast, and you can read bite-sized pieces and complete the stories in between tasks. It was a nice experience for me too. And if you love short story collection, this would be amazing. So give it a try. Thank you to the author and to the other authors that are part of this short story collection for giving me the chance to read it. And I think there's another volume. There are submissions open for the second volume of Panopticon. And yeah, you should absolutely give it a try. If you have read it, let me know what you think about it, and you go and check it out. Reading update, real quick. I'm reading The Last Vigilant by Mark A. Latham, and this is strange and nice and epic and really, really good. This is more of a murder mystery, maybe. It doesn't have the usual huge scope of epic fantasy, at least until the point that I've read. I suspect that this is the kind of story that it will become larger and larger. Maybe, to give you an idea, it has the same scope that Justice of Kings had from the first book, from Richard Swan. The first volume is kind of contained, then at the end it becomes larger, and you see the bigger world and the implications of what's going on and the potential consequence of the development of the story that you have in the first book. I think something similar will happen here, because this is a planned trilogy. It is marketed like a trilogy, so we're pretty sure that the rest of the story will be available, hopefully pretty soon. We have a central mystery, we have disappearances, we have corpses, we have people investigating what's going on with the conspiracy. That conspiracy looks bigger, and I think, and I'm telling you, that this is going to be bigger as a story. It will have a big development, because if you see the appendices, there is a huge exploration about the religion and the deities, and even the days, the names of the days, and the coins, and the seasons. There is a lot of work there for the development of the world building, and you don't do that if you're writing just a murder mystery. So I fully expect this story to blow up and to become much, much bigger in scope by the end of the book, and probably with the sequence stories. I love the dialogues, I love the characters, I love the aesthetics. I'm loving it, and I can't wait to finish it and to give you a review. If you have read this, let me know what you think about it. This is all I've got for you today. Remember that if you enjoy science fiction and fantasy books, this is the perfect place for you. So if you want to see more videos like this, please consider subscribing, leave a like, share this video. You can also support the channel by checking out my own epic fantasy novel, The Crimson Fire. The link is in the description. But if you want to see more videos like this right here, right now, you have more videos like this right here, right now. Thank you again. I'll see you in the next one.